Well, thank you, Brian. Well, grab a seat, please. Well, good evening. Good evening, Johannesburg. Wow, it's incredibly humbling to see an entire room of people sort of show up. And I was outside looking at the queue earlier. I'm thinking, damn, this guy better be good. As Brian said, I'm going to be sharing some information with you a little bit later around business and sort of making money and getting into sort of the nitty-gritty of being able to, transform your life at various different levels. But Brian asked me if I'd come up and share some information with you, specifically around the whole educational aspect. Because if you take the REAL acronym, results, education, accountability, and leverage, most of us are eager, if we want to change our lives, to be able to go and do something and put that formula in place. Show us what to do. Give me accountability. I know how to go out and get that. I'll be able to try and leverage. But the missing component for most people, if they don't already have it, is education. I've got the want to, give me the how to, right? And so what I'd like to do is just share a few things and some of the insights around learning that may provide some aspects that can deepen the journey for you, that allow you to go from where most people are in personal development, which is paying a lot of money, going on a course, and ending up with an expensive notebook, through to actually making changes in your life, because really that's all that counts, correct? So, I want to just share a couple of things with you because self-education is so important. I'm not talking, as I say, about traditional education. We all know about traditional education. School teaches you basically two things: how to pass tests and work for somebody else. Yeah? And that's pretty much it. It's always left for the entrepreneurs to be able to, find their own spark and go out and create the life they want to create. And, I'm not discounting traditional education. It teaches some good habits in terms of being able to have discipline and turn up on time and do something that will set you up for a life of unfulfillment. But it's an outdated model. It was basically came about in the early 20th century when the Industrial Revolution was put forward, where we needed a way to create a system that took population en masse and taught them how to become compliant, so they fit in the new model of the industrial world. That's how the traditional education model came. It started in Germany, it was adopted through the West, and it still serves that purpose today, even though the world has outgrown it. So, that was I got out of there at 16. I wasn't very academically gifted at all. I'm not a smart guy. But I knew there was something more. There was something about life that was calling me, that's calling each one of us, that says you're born for captaining your own ship, living your own dream, being able to move forward. Even if that's at a manager position for somebody else's organization, that's okay. Not everybody wants to be their own fully fledged entrepreneur and lead their own business. I'll share some strategies on how to do that a little later. But the key aspect on transitioning from letting go of the certainty of the traditional model, which is what keeps most people locked in, to embracing the uncertainty of following the voice inside of us that says, yes, you can do it. The transition point is, how do I educate myself to give me a position where I'm certain enough to do that? Would you agree? So I just want to share a few things. Obviously, I got into personal development. I was very lucky at 17. I read Think and Grow Rich, which should be mandatory reading. And for me, it was a transformational, but it wasn't about the book or the contents of the book. For me, it was uncovering an industry that taught you how to be successful. I'm like, wow, where was that in school? That's what I want to learn, not algebra. And so I dedicated my life at 17, and because I didn't get any qualifications at school, I just found an industry that taught me what I really wanted to learn, and I threw myself into it. So from 17, the last 6 years, over a quarter of a century, personal development and self-improvement has been a real passion of mine. So along that journey, I've learned a few things about learning that I'd like to just share briefly with you, which tie into the education aspect here. Everybody that's not investing in themselves, that's just, there's no excuse for that now. If you're happy with where you're at, then great. But nature operates on two laws, my friends: growth and contribution. Everything outside of that doesn't operate on those laws is taken out of the food chain. If we think we're different, then good luck. Bless you. So learn about learning, because most people, the way we're taught to learn doesn't support us in our own journey of growth. Again, the traditional educational model essentially supports you learning information and then remembering that information and then repeating that information in a test to validate your intelligence. Well, that doesn't validate your intelligence, that validates your memory. There's no measure of intelligence at all. So being able to learn how to learn is really what I want to share with you in the next 10 minutes to give you some insights so that even if you leave here and never see me again, you'll have an awareness of how when you go out and educate yourself, you'll be able to at least be mindful of some of the strategies and some of the things to watch for. Would that sound like it's useful? Brilliant. So there's essentially 4 stages of learning. And I'm not going to scribble these up on the board. I'm going to go through them, so please take notes. My writing is, I was a doctor in a past life, obviously. And the people at the back aren't going to see it anyway. So I'm just going to go through and give you some high points and hopefully just pull out some insights that I think can help you in the journey of understanding the process of learning how to learn. So 4 stages of being able to master something. The first stage is where most of us are at when it comes to being successful. And that is we are unconsciously incompetent. In other words, we don't even know what it is we don't know. If we knew what it is we were doing, we'd probably start to do something about it. But most of us have no clue. If we sat down for an hour with Warren Buffett, or someone like Brian, and picked their brains, then we'd start getting insight into things we didn't know previously. And those strategies would start to take shape. But before that happens, we don't even know what it is we don't know. So unconscious incompetence is where most people are at when it comes to being wealthy or building businesses. The second stage that we then go through to when we start to learn and acquire information is we become consciously incompetent. Now, this is the same for making money. It's the same for learning a language. It's the same for playing golf. It doesn't matter. These are the 4 stages that we go through. Now, if you, any golfers in the room? Yeah. Any golf widows in the room? Yeah. So we start to go to golf before we know golf exists. We're unconsciously incompetent. We don't even know, what the game's about. But then we get introduced to it. We start to say, okay, I want to learn, or salsa dancing, and we start being taught how to swing the club. And now we're exceptionally confused. We now know there's 10 different things in order to be mindful of, and how to keep your head in a position, and how to hold the grip, and how to pull with this arm rather than lead with that arm, and all these other things. We know consciously what to do, but we're still very incompetent at it, correct? And so then we move, if we keep practicing, we get to the 3rd stage, which is conscious competence. We now kind of know what to do, and we're kind of doing it. Again, if you take something like salsa dancing, people that never heard of it don't know what to do. They don't even know what they don't know. They start learning, and the poor person they're dancing with gets bruised toes. They're incompetent, but they persist and they get through and they practice, and all of a sudden now it starts to come together. We become consciously competent. And if you could imagine that the latest neuroscience, we call it neuroplasticity, which is how the brain actually adapts to new learning, where we have something built called a ganglia, which is a route through the neurons, the neural connections in the brain, which once they're built for the first time, the best metaphor I can give you is almost like a field of virgin snow. And the first time you go through, you're kind of placing your feet, and it leaves kind of footprints. The second or third time you go through, you're kind of looking for the footprints. You're getting into sort of conscious incompetence. And then all of a sudden, after a little while, there's a trail. You don't even need the footprints anymore. You can know exactly where to go. You're now consciously competent. If you keep going forward through repetition, you move to the 4th stage of learning, which is unconscious competence. Now you can walk the path with your eyes shut. You've done it that many times. Now you can swing the golf club, and you're not having to think of the 10 things that are all there. They're instantly wired or hardwired into the brain. Now you're starting to do an outside turn effortlessly, and the feet are just moving the way they should as you dance. You're moving into unconscious competence. That's the area of mastery. Now, unfortunately, most people quit at which stage do you think? Which stage? Stage 1, 2, 3, or 4? They can't quit at 1. They don't even know it's there. Yeah. Stage 2. Stage 2, why? And this is where you want to pay attention. The reason people are overwhelmed, definitely because at that point, it's the brain tends to get confused. So overwhelm usually leads to confusion, which usually leads to inaction. So when people are trying to learn too much, they learn so much they do nothing. But there's another primary reason that most people quit at the area of conscious incompetence. And that is because it triggers something that is inherent to every human being that I've worked with. And this isn't cultural, it's not conditional, it's something that is unfortunately present and prevalent for so many people. And it's the primary fear, which is the fear that we're not enough. Not good enough, not tall enough, short enough, old enough, rich enough, whatever it is, fill in the blank. Every person in the room has a blank to fill in. For those that think they haven't, it's usually because our egos are playing hide and seek with reality. But if you are exposed to the primary fear, and we'll get into this on how it relates to money a little later, then most people would rather withdraw than appear to be not good enough. And if you want to look at one area that, out of the 4 stages of learning, that instantly triggers that, it's the second stage, where I'm now consciously aware of how useless I am. I'm starting to learn French, and part of me's kind of there. I know what it is that I want, but I still feel uncomfortable trying to order a drink or a meal in a restaurant because it's not coming out right, and I'm wrestling with it. So I'd rather shut up and not say anything and just point to the picture. So most people quit at level 2 not because they're not clever enough, not because they're not intelligent, not because they don't want it bad enough, but because it triggers the fear that we're not enough. Now, one of the other latest things that have come out of neuroscience is the role of how we learn at a level of being able to transition through those 4 levels at a faster rate. How do we build talent? And there's a substance that's been ignored by science for many, many years because they didn't realize it was valuable, and it's a substance called myelin. And myelin is something that coats the actual neural connections, very similar to how plastic coats the wires that we plug our computers in so they don't electrocute our hands. They act as insulation because the brain is electromagnetic. It sends electrical impulses. Now, another reason that we coat the wires on our computer is not just so we don't get a shock, it's why? Makes them more efficient. There's less leakage. And so if we coat our neurons in myelin, then the neural connections happen 30 to 50% faster, and you learn very, very quickly. Now, what's very interesting about that, and by the way, that's when they looked at Einstein's brain. They were looking for mass, they were looking for size, and Einstein had an average size brain. In fact, one of the largest brains on record is that of an idiot. Size has nothing to do with it. Why is everyone looking at me when I say, because I'm speaking, okay. So it's not about the size of the brain, but when they re-looked and saw how much myelin had been produced, then it all started to make sense. But here's where it gets interesting. Myelin is built 10 times faster in the area of conscious incompetence. And it's an evolutionary thing. For example, if we're starting to learn how to walk, we better start learning fast, especially when we live in a time, or lived in a time, where things that ran faster than us could eat us. So, we need to learn quickly. And the best analogy that I can give, it's that place where it's almost like you're in a dark room with a blindfold and you're kind of bumping up against things and hitting your knee, and it's awkward and you're trying to figure it out. And a little bit later, you've kind of got the room mapped out, but you're still stumbling until a point where, you've gone through it enough where there's a chair here, and there's a wall there, etc. But it's that sort of stumbling, coming back, figuring it out, repatterning, going back again. It's there that myelin is built 10 times faster than anywhere else and will catapult you through conscious incompetence through to conscious competence. So when we get frustrated, when we get overwhelmed, the response for most people is to quit, walk away. This isn't for me. I'm not cut out for this. You hear the language. Oh, no, I'm not cut out for this. No one's cut out for anything. You're cut out for everything. You may have a natural predisposition, but your heart will tell you where that is. Not trying to do something to prove that you're good enough. You know, you take your son to a doctor or a surgeon, you don't want to know he's a cut-out brain surgeon, do you? No, you want to know he went to school for 4 years and then went to medical college. And then, yeah. So, yeah, it's no excuse that I'm not cut out for this. You're cut out for everything. It's about going through those processes. So at the point where it's frustrating, at the point where, you know, you're applying the strategies and the money's still not quite showing up, but, you know, you think there's something there, it's at that point most people quit. Just that far from success. Because the fear is that I'm not good enough, I'm not going to make it. And most people would rather withdraw from that fear than recognize what's happening, which is you're absolutely in the right place. Persevere that little bit more. Push that little bit harder, just to that point. Embrace the discomfort. Embrace the discomfort at that level, and you'll be amazed at what happens and how quickly the door on the other side opens. Is this making sense? But when it comes to learning traditionally, most people think, oh, I've got to remember everything. That's not the way it works. The last thing I'm going to share with you quickly on learning is that once we can understand those 4 different levels, there's 3 other stages of learning that I want to categorize for you that will allow you to recognize where most people start to take action or not in the first place. I've given you the journey to mastery. The journey through those 4 levels to recognize, but there's 3 stages of learning. I'm going to sum them up really quick. And the first stage is really what Brian was talking about earlier, where most people unfortunately know what to do, but they don't do what they know. And that is the level where most people sit, and you'll see how it ties in a moment. And it's the level of intellectual understanding. Intellectual understanding is the level of learning that most people go for. Oh, I kind of know that. But knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. Would you agree? So why do most people do it? This is the expensive notebook I was talking about earlier. And there's a specific reason for it. I'm going to chunk it down quickly, and then I'm going to hand back to Brian. But I just want to make you aware of what's going on when we just go to learn something, because there's more to it than just sitting there trying to read something. But the first level of intellectual understanding means nothing. Means what? Nothing. Smokers know they shouldn't smoke. Yeah, smokers aren't unintellectual people. Yeah, everybody knows there's no logical argument you can construct on this planet right now for why you should set fire to something toxic, stick it in your mouth and suck the fumes. Sorry, guys. I mean, 50 years ago, the doctors were telling you to do it, right? Now we're a little more aware. Right? Now, again, not picking on the smokers as such, although I am. Right? But what I'm saying is, smokers know they shouldn't smoke. Yeah, now we can get into habit conditioning and different levels of cause and needs, and that's a separate conversation. But for purposes of this analogy, intellectual understanding doesn't mean they're not going to smoke, correct? What causes somebody to stop smoking is the second level, where it starts to deepen and we go from intellectual understanding to emotional understanding. When you feel something, where rather than just the thinking sector kicks in, the feeling center gets kicked in, then all of a sudden you're compelled to take action. Now, instead of me saying, oh yeah, I should give up, or I should go to the gym, your 6-year-old daughter comes up, looks at you and says, Daddy, please give up smoking. I don't want you to die. I want you to walk me up the aisle at my wedding, and I don't think you're going to make it, and runs off crying. He's like, Or you go to the doctors, and he says, oh, these headaches you've been having, we've had the blood test back, and I'm afraid to say that if you take one more cigarette, you could suffer a fatal stroke. Now, did you suddenly become more intelligent about smoking? No. You didn't learn something new, but you went from intellectual understanding to now, whoa, I get it. The penny drops. Yeah, that level of emotional trigger is really what's required for most people to start to act differently. Otherwise, it's just intellectual, which means you can probably sound smart at a cocktail party, but it's not going to change your life. So emotional understanding is where you want to get to, and that's where the why comes in. Why do you want what it is that you want? What is it that you want? Is it for the right reasons, or am I just trying to prove to my parents that I was good enough? Yeah, or my elder brother, or the world, or what have you. But emotional understanding doesn't give lasting change. It gives change in the moment. What gives lasting change is understanding, getting through to the third level, or the third stage of deepening the knowledge, which is the identity. It becomes part of who you are. It's a cellular level of learning. It's in your DNA. It becomes your identity. You see, if you've got a smoker, right, who knows they shouldn't smoke, it's not going to do anything. If you get a smoker who suddenly is out of breath running for the bus and thinks, that's it, screw it, I'm got to change my life, emotional. But 3 weeks later, they're still smoking unless they change their identity. And unfortunately, most people at that point become a smoker who's quit. And if you're a smoker who's quit, it's only a matter of time before you go back. Because your identity is you're still a smoker. And now you're engaged in willpower because I'm a smoker, but I've quit. So someone offers you a cigarette. It's like there's this push-pull going on. And willpower has a time limit. You know, I can have all the willpower in the world to hang on to a ledge above a cliff, but if you come back in 2 weeks, I'm not there. Right? But if you change your identity to become a non-smoker, and somebody offers you a cigarette, what do you say? It's effortless. There's none of that push-pull going on. So my question for you before I hand back to Brian is this. When it comes to money, success, business, what is your identity? Who are you? Do you see yourself as a millionaire? Or do you see yourself as somebody who's broke that wants to make more money to get out of pain? Do you see yourself as somebody that's committed to learning and willing to embrace looking stupid, incompetent, not good enough, and all of the emotions that most people run from because you know what's on the other side? Or is it just going to be, well, I'll take the class and then it's the world's fault if I don't make it? These are the questions that one has to ask and be honest with yourself, as Brian said, being a humble student, because at that level, everything starts to change. I hope that's been useful, and I look forward to chatting with you in a bit. Thank you.